The moment people hear that there is a gate of Jannah whose true name carries a weight so powerful that scholars rarely speak it directly, something inside them tightens, because it means there is something about paradise we are not fully prepared to confront. A gate linked not to a single deed, not to a simple description, but to a level of devotion that only a few will ever touch. And before we go deeper, tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching this from. And if you enjoy learning these hidden gems of Islamic knowledge, make sure you subscribe so you never miss these reminders. Most people grow up hearing the names of Jannah's gates. The gate for those who fast, for those who pray, for those who give charity, for those who struggle in the path of Allah. They roll off the tongue easily, familiar, comforting. But when you reach the 8th gate, something strange happens. The clarity fades, the details soften, and the narration becomes more mysterious. It's not presented with a bold title the way the others are. Instead, it sits like a treasure covered in a thin veil, mentioned in hadith, yet wrapped in an aura of quiet reverence. And that silence around its name is not casual, it is intentional, because the meaning behind it is not something you simply learn, it is something you grow into. When scholars explain the gates of Jannah, they describe each one with confidence, until they arrive at this one. Then their tone shifts. They speak more carefully, more humbly, because this gate is tied to something deeper than outward actions. This gate points toward a level of faith where your heart becomes a witness to Allah in every moment, where the purpose of every breath aligns with something higher. It's a place reserved for people whose entire lives became a message of sincerity. And if you listen closely to the early scholars, they don't avoid naming this gate because it's forbidden. They avoid it because no single word can capture the magnitude of what it represents. They believed that attaching one simple title might mislead people into thinking it belongs to a specific group, when in reality, it belongs to those who lived an entire existence soaked in devotion. The Prophet described the gates in beautiful detail, explaining who will be summoned from them: those who prayed consistently, those who fasted sincerely, those who gave charity generously. These gates feel familiar because they correspond to actions we understand. But when it comes to the 8th gate, the narrations shift. Instead of focusing on a specific deed, they focus on a kind of believer. A believer whose worship is not confined to one area, whose righteousness is not defined by a single habit. Someone whose entire spiritual identity shines from every direction. And while the Prophet did not highlight a specific name the way he did for Bab ar-Rayyan or Bab as-Salah, the scholars noticed something remarkable. This gate seems connected to a state of faith that is not limited to what you do, but who you are. This is where the concept of Ihsaan quietly enters, not declared loudly as the name of the gate, but reflected in the qualities of those who will walk through it. Because Ihsaan means to worship Allah as though you see Him, and if you cannot see Him, then to know with certainty that He sees you. It is an inner transformation, a spiritual awakening that turns every ordinary moment into an act of worship. And that's why this gate stands apart. You cannot earn it the way you earn a medal. You cannot check it off like a list. It's a culmination of sincerity, humility, and constant awareness. It requires the believer to reach a level where their heart becomes so anchored in Allah that even the world cannot shake it. That is why scholars speak cautiously, because who among us can confidently say they live in the state of Ihsaan every day? Who can declare themselves worthy of such a gate? The silence around its name protects us from arrogance and pushes us towards self-reflection. This mysterious gate, this unnamed doorway of paradise, teaches us something profound without saying a single word. True devotion cannot be packaged into a title. True righteousness is not a performance. And the believers who will stand before this gate will not be the loudest, the most famous, or the most praised. They will be those whose hearts carried the quiet weight of sincerity, hidden from the world, but illuminated before Allah. Many scholars throughout history quietly understood that the eighth gate draws its identity from something far deeper than any outward deed, something that transforms a believer from the inside out, something the Prophet described with words so powerful they echo through every generation. When Jibril asked him about Ihsaan, the Prophet said, "It is to worship Allah as though you see Him, and if you cannot see Him, know that He sees you." That single definition holds more spiritual weight than entire books, because it's not just about performing worship, it's about living in a constant state of awareness. Ihsaan means your heart is awake even when the world around you is asleep. It means your conscience whispers remembrance even when your tongue is silent. It means your intentions are pure even when your actions are small. And this inner state, this spiritual excellence, is what scholars linked to the mysterious eighth gate. They understood that this door of paradise is not merely a passageway, it's a station of honor, a destination for those who lived their lives with a hidden beauty that few noticed in dunya, but everyone will witness in the akhirah. When people imagine acts that lead to Jannah, they picture big, dramatic moments, major charity, long fasts, nights of prayer that stretch until dawn. But the people of Ihsaan may also be the ones who did the smallest things with the greatest sincerity. The one who gave a single date in charity, but gave it with a pure heart. The one who prayed quietly in the corner of their room while their family slept. The one who forgave someone who didn't deserve it, not because they were weak, but because they wanted Allah's mercy more than they wanted revenge. These people don't live for recognition. They don't need applause. Their worship isn't decorative. Their piety isn't performance. Their hearts are attached to Allah, whether they are in crowds or alone. And this is what makes the eighth gate so different. It is for people whose righteousness was consistent in private and public, whose faith wasn't seasonal, whose devotion wasn't dependent on mood or environment. They lived Ihsaan, even if they never used the word themselves. Some scholars avoid naming this gate explicitly for one profound reason. The Prophet didn't give it a single, definitive title the way he did with other gates. Instead of assigning a label, he described a type of believer who would be invited through it, someone who excelled in every aspect of worship. This is why many scholars speak with caution. They fear that if they give this gate a single fixed name, people might misunderstand its purpose. They might believe it is only for the most spiritually elite, or for those who spend every night in tahajjud, or for scholars, or for warriors. But the reality is far more hopeful and far more challenging. This gate belongs to anyone who cultivated sincerity in every corner of their life. It could be the mother who raised her children with patience, the worker who refused to cheat even when it was easy, the young person who fought their desires and chose purity, the student who cried in sujood, asking Allah for guidance. Ihsaan is vast, and the scholars knew that reducing it to a single narrow definition would rob it of its beauty. Another reason scholars hesitate to declare a fixed name for this gate is humility. How can a human being confidently claim to understand the full meaning of a gate reserved for the most sincere believers? To name it too boldly would be to assume mastery over something that is meant to remain spiritually elevated. The Prophet himself described people who will be called from every gate of paradise, including this one. These people aren't defined by one specialty, they're defined by balance, by consistency, by purity of heart. So scholars treat the eighth gate with reverence because it represents the culmination of a believer's entire relationship with Allah. not a single action that can be labeled, measured, or limited. The silence around its name teaches a powerful lesson. It reminds us that Islam is not just about ticking off obligations or achieving milestones. It's about sincerity in the unseen moments. It's about the state of your heart when no one is watching. It's about striving for excellence even when you feel unnoticed. This gate's name remains unspoken because Allah wants you to focus not on titles, but on transformation. Not on labels, but on sincerity. Not on what people see, but on what Allah knows. And maybe that's why scholars don't boldly announce its name. Because this gate isn't meant to impress the ears. It's meant to shape the soul. Most believers walk through life focusing on the basics, praying the obligatory prayers, fasting Ramadan, giving charity when they can, avoiding what's clearly forbidden. These are the pillars, the foundations, and they are essential. But the people destined for the mysterious eighth gate go beyond the surface of obedience and enter a realm where every action becomes an opportunity to deepen their connection with Allah. They don't simply pray, they protect their prayer. They guard it from distraction, from laziness, from rushing through it as if it were a task to complete rather than a conversation with the Creator. They don't just fast in Ramadan, they fast when their heart calls them to it, when they feel distant from Allah, when they need purification, when they want to discipline the soul. They give charity quietly, often secretly, not to be seen or praised, but because they genuinely believe that everything given for Allah's sake returns multiplied. These are believers who, when anger rises, swallow it for the sake of Allah, even though responding would feel easier. When someone wrongs them, they forgive not because the other person deserves it, but because they want to be forgiven by their Lord. When they are alone, they resist temptation because they fear disappointing the one who sees all things. Their goodness is not accidental, it is intentional. Their devotion is not occasional, it is consistent. And this is what elevates them far above average righteousness. They live their lives as if every moment might be recorded as a witness for them on the day of judgment. And that awareness shapes their actions in ways the world rarely sees. This is why the eighth gate stands apart. It is not for those who only fulfilled the minimum. It is for those who beautified their worship. They polished their manners, purified their intentions, and elevated their character. They didn't stop at obligation. They stepped into excellence. Their prayers were not just physical movements. They were anchored in humility. Their charity wasn't just amounts, it was empathy. Their fasting wasn't just hunger, it was discipline of the heart. These people walked through life carrying a kind of divine consciousness that prevented them from cutting corners in their deen. They didn't ask, "What's the least I need to do?" They asked, "What's the best way to do it?" And this is why their deeds shine brighter in the Akhirah, because they weren't performed out of habit, they were performed out of love. The eighth gate is for those whose Islamic practice wasn't mechanical but meaningful, whose worship wasn't occasional but consistent, whose hearts weren't distracted but present. It is for those whose faith was not a part of their life, it was their life. Then comes the question everyone wonders: why do some people call the name of this gate forbidden? Why is there so much silence surrounding it? The reason is not some mystical secret being hidden by scholars. It is something much deeper, something tied to the nature of Ihsaan itself. This gate's association with excellence, true, complete, inner excellence, means its reality is far beyond what can be confidently assigned to a word. To boldly name it would be like saying, "I know exactly what level of sincerity Allah desires from the highest category of believers." And no scholar dares to speak with such certainty. They fear limiting its meaning. They fear oversimplifying something that Allah intentionally left broad and profound. And most importantly, they fear giving people the false impression that they can claim a level of spiritual perfection when humility is the very foundation of reaching it. It's not forbidden because Allah banned its name. It's forbidden in the sense that it pushes away anyone who tries to approach it with arrogance. You cannot enter this gate thinking you've mastered worship. You cannot enter thinking you're better than others. You cannot stand before it claiming purity for yourself. This gate is reserved for hearts that tremble, for souls that are constantly renewing repentance, for believers who don't boast about their good deeds because they are too busy worrying whether Allah accepted even one of them. People who think they've done enough will never reach this gate because the people of this gate always feel they could have done more. That's the secret. The humility itself is the key. The sincerity itself is the qualification. It is the very nature of this gate that keeps its name subtle and unpronounced. Another reason it feels forbidden is because it cannot be labeled the way the others are. Bab ar-Rayyan is for fasting. Bab as-Salah is for prayer. Bab as-Sadaqah is for charity. These are straightforward, but the eighth gate reflects something too wide, too deep, too intimate between a believer and their Lord. It symbolizes a relationship, not a ritual, a lifelong commitment, not a moment of worship. And that relationship is different for every believer. One person's excellence may come from patience, another from quiet acts of kindness, another from costly sacrifices made in private. To give one fixed name to such a vast spiritual category would be to strip it of its depth. That's why scholars speak of it with reverence, because it represents something that lives beyond words. It demands a level of sincerity that cannot be measured by humans, only by Allah. This forbidden nature should not scare believers. It should inspire them. It reminds us that true closeness to Allah is not loud, dramatic, or showy. It is quiet, consistent, and pure. It reminds us that the highest ranks of paradise aren't given to those who are perfect. They're given to those who never stop trying. It teaches us that the path to the unseen gate is not about achieving spiritual perfection. It's about striving for it again and again, even when you fall. And perhaps the most beautiful thing about this gate is that anyone can reach it. It doesn't require wealth, fame, or status. It requires sincerity. It requires effort. It requires a heart that remembers Allah often, repents often, and loves Him more than anything else. There is a moment in the hadith literature that feels almost unreal when you imagine it. The Prophet told Abu Bakr that there will be believers on the Day of Judgment who will be called from every single gate of Jannah. Not one gate, not two, all 8. That means the angels at each entrance will look at them and say, "Come through here," as if every door was custom built for them. Think about what that implies. It means these believers didn't specialize in just one type of worship. They excelled in every area of their faith. Their prayers were strong, their fasting sincere, their charity pure, their patience unwavering. Their character carried mercy, their hearts carried humility, and their intentions carried truth. Their entire spiritual identity was balanced, complete, and radiant. They weren't one-dimensional worshipers. They were holistic servants of Allah. The 8th gate reflects this state more than anything else. It represents a level of harmony where a believer's inner and outer actions align so beautifully that no single gate can claim them. They belong everywhere. They fit everywhere. They are honored everywhere. And the moment they are called from every gate is not a moment of pride. It's a moment of divine acknowledgement that their striving, their effort, and their hidden deeds were seen by the one who sees everything. Imagine standing on that day, surrounded by trillions of souls, and hearing your name being called not once, but 8 times. The humility of those believers will be overwhelming. They will walk forward, not thinking, I earned this, but thinking, Allah accepted something from me. Because the people who are called from every gate never viewed themselves as exceptional. They were the ones constantly worried about their sincerity, constantly asking Allah to accept their deeds, constantly struggling against their own ego. And this is exactly what ties them to the mysterious 8th gate. That gate is not tied to a single act of worship. It's tied to the inner state of a believer whose life became a tapestry of devotion. They lived in such a way that even when the world forgot them, the heavens remembered them. And the angels who stand at the gates of Jannah will witness that devotion on the day of judgment, calling them forward with honor that no human tongue can fully describe. The greatness of these believers is not that they performed more deeds than others, it's that their deeds were soaked in sincerity, humility, and longing for Allah's pleasure. That is the essence of the 8th gate, the hidden quality that scholars whisper about but rarely define. It is not a title, it is a condition of the heart. And then comes the final lesson, the real purpose behind the hidden nature of this gate. If Allah wanted to name it clearly, He could have. If the Prophet wanted to label it explicitly, he would have. Its ambiguity is intentional. It forces you to look inward instead of outward. It shifts your focus from what is the name of the gate to what kind of person enters it. And that question is infinitely more important, because the answer has nothing to do with memorizing facts or collecting Islamic trivia. The answer demands a transformation of the soul. It challenges you to ask yourself uncomfortable questions. Do you worship Allah only when people are watching? Or do you carry faith in your private moments when only He can see you? Do you give charity publicly for recognition or quietly for acceptance? Do you treat people kindly only when it benefits you or even when there's nothing to gain? Do you forgive because it's easy or because Allah loves forgiveness? The hidden identity of the 8th gate exposes every believer's true intentions. You can fake a title. You cannot fake Ihsaan. This gate teaches the believer that spiritual excellence is not about accomplishment. It's about sincerity. It's not about perfection. It's about persistence. It's not about appearing righteous. It's about being righteous when no one is around to witness it. That is why the gate remains unnamed, because it belongs to the people whose hearts speak louder than their words, whose private worship outweighs their public acts, whose relationship with Allah is stronger than their relationship with the world. These are the people who will not walk through Jannah with pride. They will walk through it with gratitude, with tears in their eyes, overwhelmed that Allah accepted their hidden struggles, their quiet sacrifices, their silent du'as made in the darkest nights. And this should give every believer hope, because the path to this gate is not reserved for scholars or saints or leaders. It is open to anyone who decides to purify their heart. It is open to anyone who resists sin even when no one would know. It is open to anyone who asks Allah for guidance with sincerity. It is open to anyone who puts effort into their worship, even if their deeds seem small to others. The 8th gate exists to remind us that Allah does not measure worship the way people do. He sees what is inside. He sees what others overlook. He sees the moment you fight your ego, the moment you let something go for His sake, the moment you choose honesty over convenience, the moment you repent with sincerity. These moments are the keys to the unseen gate. This is why its name is hidden, because the journey to Taru, it lives inside the believer, not on their tongue. And on the day of judgment, those hidden moments will shine brighter than anything you ever displayed publicly.